I always thought I'd cry at my sister's wedding. I just never imagined it would be because she left her fiancé standing alone at the altar while I watched 300 guests dissolve into chaos. My name is Juliet, and I've spent 29 years being Sophia's younger sister, the other daughter, the reliable one, the one who was currently chasing after her sister's abandoned groom while everyone else was busy gossiping and heading for the exits. I found Brian in the church garden, his bow tie loose around his neck, staring at nothing. The late autumn wind whipped around us, scattering fallen leaves across the perfectly manicured lawn. She left a note, he said without looking at me, holding up a folded piece of paper. I need to find myself. I'm sorry. That's all she wrote. I sat beside him on the stone bench. I'm so sorry, Brian. I had no idea she would do something this selfish. He laughed, but it was hollow. Maybe I should have seen it coming. Your sister always did whatever she wanted. Consequences be damned. Let me help, I said, reaching for my phone. I can start calling the vendors, the hotel. You don't have to clean up her mess. I want to. I touched his arm gently. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw him, really saw him, not as Sophia's fiancé, but as a man whose heart had just been shattered. Thank you, Juliet. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls and damage control. I coordinated with the reception venue while Brian spoke with his family. My parents were beside themselves, more concerned about their reputation than their future son-in-law's feelings. What will people say? Mom kept repeating, pacing the church office. The Waltons, all their friends? This is a disaster. Mom, please, I said, covering the phone's mouthpiece. I'm trying to cancel the honeymoon arrangements. Your sister has ruined everything, Dad growled, his face red with anger. All our connections, all our planning. I hung up the phone and turned to them. Can we focus on helping Brian right now? He's the one who was just abandoned on his wedding day. Of course you defend him, Mom snapped. You've always been jealous of your sister's relationship. The words stung, but I kept my voice steady. I'm being a decent human being. You should try it sometime. I left them sputtering and found Brian in the parking lot, loosening his cufflinks. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty church grounds. The honeymoon's canceled, I said. Full refund, thankfully, and the hotel will handle the reception food donation. You're amazing, he said softly. I don't know what I would have done without you today. Probably punched something expensive. He smiled. A real smile this time. Want to grab a drink? I could use one, and I hate the thought of being alone right now. I hesitated. Are you sure? People might talk. Let them. You're the only person who's shown me real kindness today. Everyone else is either pitying me or blaming me. We ended up at a quiet bar across town, both still in our wedding attire. I'd kicked off my heels under the table, and Brian had shed his jacket. 2 glasses of whiskey sat between us. Tell me something, he said, swirling the amber liquid. Was she always like this? So, careless with other people's feelings? I took a sip before answering. Sophia lives in Sophia's world. The rest of us are just supporting characters in her story. Including you? Especially me. I traced the rim of my glass. Do you know what it's like growing up with someone who outshines you in every way? Someone who takes up all the oxygen in the room? Brian leaned forward. I think you sell yourself short, Juliet. You're not in anyone's shadow, not today at least. Our eyes met across the table, and something shifted in the air between us. A moment of recognition, perhaps, or understanding. My phone buzzed. Another text from Mom demanding to know where I was, but I ignored it. To new beginnings, Brian said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his, trying to ignore the flutter in my chest. To new beginnings. As we sat there talking into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had changed. I just didn't know if I was ready for what that might mean. 3 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, I found myself at Brian's office, helping him sort through the mountain of returned gifts. The winter sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the cardboard boxes scattered around us. Another crystal vase, I said, rewrapping it carefully. That makes 7? 8. Brian checked something off his list. Rich people really lack imagination when it comes to wedding gifts. At least they're easier to return than the monogrammed items, he grimaced. Don't remind me about those towels. Paris, my best friend, appeared in the doorway with coffee. You two look like you're having way too much fun with other people's terrible taste. Join us, I said, patting the carpet beside me. We're making a drinking game out of how many serving platters we find. Can't. Some of us have actual work to do. She handed me my latte. Though I have to say, Jules, you've gotten awfully comfortable in the CEO's office. I felt my cheeks warm as Brian looked up from his list. Juliet's been invaluable these past weeks. I don't know how I would have handled all this without her. Mm-hmm, Paris hummed knowingly, giving me a pointed look before heading back to her desk. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, our hands occasionally brushing as we passed items back and forth. Each touch sent little sparks through my skin, making it harder to concentrate. Have dinner with me tonight, Brian said suddenly. I dropped the silver picture frame I was holding. What? Dinner, you and me, somewhere nice. He ran a hand through his hair, looking nervous for the first time since I'd known him. Not as a thank you, as a date. My heart hammered against my ribs. Brian, people will talk. They're already talking. Half the office thinks we're having a torrid affair. And the other half thinks I'm an idiot for not asking you out sooner. He moved closer, taking my hands in his. I know the timing is complicated, but these past weeks with you, I've never felt more seen, more understood. I'm still her sister, I whispered. You're you. That's who I want to have dinner with. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Paris. Say yes, you idiot. I can see you overthinking from here. I laughed, showing Brian the message. Apparently, we have an audience. Is that a yes? I took a deep breath. Yes. That evening, I stood in front of my closet while Paris lounged on my bed, critiquing outfit choices. The black dress, she insisted. It's sexy, but not trying too hard. This is crazy, right? I pulled on the dress. He was supposed to marry my sister. Your sister who abandoned him and hasn't contacted anyone in almost a month? Paris sat up. Jewel, stop looking for reasons this won't work. You deserve to be happy. But, no buts. I've watched you dim your light for Sophia your entire life. It's your turn to shine. The restaurant Brian chose was intimate, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. As the waiter poured our wine, I noticed Brian's hands shaking slightly. Are you nervous? I asked, surprised. Terrified. He smiled. I really don't want to mess this up. Why would you mess it up? Because you matter, Juliet. More than I expected. More than I was prepared for. Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the moment like a knife. Brian? Juliet? Nathaniel, Brian's business partner, stood at our table, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. Well, he said coldly, this is interesting timing. Nathaniel, Brian started, having dinner with your runaway bride's sister? Really? He shook his head. I expected better from you, Brian. And you, he turned to me. I thought you had more class than this. I felt the blood drain from my face as other diners began to stare. Brian stood up, his voice low and dangerous. That's enough, Nathaniel. You don't know what you're talking about. I know what this looks like to everyone else, to our investors. I don't care what it looks like. Brian's hand found mine across the table. Juliet is the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. Nathaniel scoffed and walked away. The moment he left, my phone lit up with a text. My heart stopped as I read it. What is it? Brian asked, concern etching his features. I turned the phone to show him the message from Mom. Sophia's coming home. The wine suddenly tasted bitter in my mouth as I realized our complicated situation was about to become impossible. Sophia swept into our parents' house like a hurricane in designer boots, dropping her bags in the foyer as if the past month hadn't happened. I watched from the kitchen doorway as Mom and Dad fawned over her. Their prodigal daughter returned. India was just life-changing, she gushed, flipping her perfect hair. I had this amazing spiritual awakening at an ashram. You abandoned your wedding for an ashram? I couldn't help interrupting. She turned to me with that familiar condescending smile. Jules, sweetie, you look different. Have you lost weight? No, I've just found my backbone. Mom shot me a warning look. Girls, please, Sophia's just gotten home. Let's not start. Start what? I asked. Talking about how she left 300 people stranded at a church? How she didn't even have the decency to tell Brian to his face. I needed to find myself, Sophia said, as if that explained everything. Speaking of Brian, how is he? The casual way she said his name made my blood boil. Why don't you ask him yourself? Oh, wait, you blocked his number. Juliet, Dad snapped. That's enough. Your sister made a difficult decision. A selfish decision, I corrected. Sophia's eyes narrowed. You seem awfully defensive of my ex-fiancé. The room went silent. I felt the weight of their stares, waiting for my response. Before I could speak, the doorbell rang. That'll be Paris, I said, grabbing my coat. We're having lunch. Actually, Sophia called after me, I thought I might stop by Brian's office today. You know, clear the air. I froze with my hand on the doorknob. Don't. Why not? Her voice dripped with false innocence. Unless there's a reason I shouldn't? I yanked open the door, relief flooding through me at the sight of Paris's concerned face. She took one look at my expression and pulled me outside. Sophia's back, I said as soon as we were in her car. I gathered. You look like you've seen a ghost. She wants to see Brian. Paris pulled away from the curb, cursing under her breath. Of course she does. The moment you're happy, she has to swoop in and try to take it. What if... Don't, Paris cut me off. Don't you dare doubt what you and Brian have. Call him right now and warn him. I pulled out my phone, but a text from Brian was already waiting. Sophia just showed up at my office. Can you come? 20 minutes later, I rushed through the lobby of Brian's building, my heart pounding. The elevator seemed to take forever, each floor a torture of imagination running wild. When I reached his floor, I heard Sophia's laugh floating down the hallway. I rounded the corner to find her perched on the edge of Brian's desk, while he stood by the window, arms crossed. Remember that weekend in the Hamptons? She was saying. When we snuck away from that charity gala? I remember you left me there to go shopping with your friends. Brian replied coldly. Oh, don't be like that. She stood, moving toward him. We had good times, didn't we? Before I got scared? Scared? His laugh was bitter. Is that what you're calling it? I made a mistake, she said softly, reaching for his hand. I know that now. After all this soul-searching, I realized what really matters. I should have announced my presence, should have interrupted, but I found myself frozen in the doorway, watching this familiar scene play out. Sophia always got what she wanted, always. What matters, Brian said, pulling his hand away, is that I'm seeing someone. Sophia's perfect smile faltered. What? Who? Me, I said, finally finding my voice. Sophia whirled around, her eyes widening as she took in my presence. For a moment, genuine shock crossed her face before it morphed into something harder. My own sister, she said quietly. How long have you been waiting to steal my life? Brian moved to stand beside me. She didn't steal anything you didn't throw away. So this is revenge? Sophia laughed, but it was sharp and ugly. Little Jules finally getting back at Big Sister by taking her leftovers? That's enough, Brian snapped, but I touched his arm. No, let her talk, I said. It's all she knows how to do. Talk about herself, make everything about her. Even now, you can't see past your own ego to realize that Brian and I might actually care about each other. Care about each other? Sophia's voice rose. It's been a month. A month where she showed me more kindness and understanding than you did in 2 years. Brian said. Sophia grabbed her bag, her movements sharp and angry. At the door, she turned back to us. This isn't over. You both know this isn't right. As her heels clicked down the hallway, I felt Brian's arms wrap around me from behind. You okay? He whispered. No, I admitted, but I will be. She's poisoning everyone against me, I said, pacing Paris's living room. You should see the looks I get at family dinners, like I'm some kind of homewrecker. Paris handed me a glass of wine. Sophia's just doing what she does best, playing the victim. Mom keeps saying I'm confused about my feelings. Dad barely speaks to me. I collapsed onto the couch. And don't get me started on their country club friends. Screw them. Paris sat beside me. What does Brian say about all this? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Another text from Sophia. We need to talk, alone. Speak of the devil, I muttered, showing Paris the message. Don't go, she warned. It's a trap. If I don't, she'll just show up somewhere unexpected. Better to face her on my terms. I agreed to meet Sophia at a cafe downtown, choosing a public place on purpose. When I arrived, she was already there, stirring her latte with calculated precision. You're looking well, she said as I sat down. Love suits you. Cut the act, Sophia. What do you want? She leaned forward, dropping her voice. I want you to think about what you're doing. Really think about it. Do you honestly believe Brian loves you? Yes, I said firmly. I do. Or does he love how much I hurt him and you're just convenient? The words hit their mark, but I kept my face neutral. Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? I'm trying to protect you, she insisted. You're setting yourself up for heartbreak. The moment I decide I want him back, that's the difference between us, I cut in. You see Brian as something to want or not want. I see him as someone to love. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the table. You've always wanted what was mine. My clothes, my friends, my spotlight. Your hand-me-downs, you mean? The friends who only tolerated me because of you? The spotlight you made sure I never had? Mom and Dad are devastated. She tried a different angle. This is tearing our family apart. No, your actions tore our family apart. I'm just finally standing up for myself. Sophia's face hardened. Fine, have it your way, but don't come crying to me when this all falls apart. She stood to leave, but paused. Oh, and Jules? Brian likes his coffee with 2 sugars, no cream. But you probably knew that already, right? I waited until she left before letting out the breath I'd been holding. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone to call Brian. Hey, his voice came through warm and steady. Everything okay? Can you meet me? I need to ask you something. 20 minutes later, we sat on a park bench, watching kids play on the swings. Do you still love her? I asked quietly. Brian turned to face me fully. No, I don't think I ever really did. But listen to me, He took my hands in his. What I felt for Sophia it was like looking at a beautiful painting. You can admire it, but you can't connect with it. With you, I feel seen, really seen. She said I was convenient. You're the least convenient thing in my life right now. He laughed. My business partner barely speaks to me. My mother keeps asking if I've lost my mind, and I'm pretty sure your father is plotting my murder. Despite everything, I smiled. So, why bother? Because when I'm with you, none of that matters. Because you challenge me, support me, make me laugh. Because I'm falling in love with you, Juliet, and it terrifies me in the best possible way. My heart stopped. What did you just say? I love you. He said it simply, certainly. I probably shouldn't say it yet, but I do. And if that makes me crazy or inappropriate or whatever else people want to call it, then so be it. I kissed him then, right there in the park, not caring who saw or what they might think. When we pulled apart, I was crying. I love you too, I whispered. And it terrifies me too. My phone buzzed, another message from Sophia, but I ignored it. For once in my life, I wasn't going to let her ruin my moment. Want to really give people something to talk about? Brian asked, a mischievous glint in his eye. What did you have in mind? There's a charity gala next week. Come with me. As my date, let's stop hiding. I thought about Sophia's threats, my parents' disappointment, the whispers and stares we'd face. Then I looked at Brian's hopeful face and made my decision. Yes, I said, let's give them something to talk about. The gala was in full swing when Mom cornered me by the champagne fountain. I'd managed to avoid her for the first hour, staying close to Brian as we worked the room. What do you think you're doing? She hissed, gripping my arm. Half the board members are here. Do you have any idea how this looks? I gently pulled away. Like two consenting adults attending a charity event together? Like a sister stealing her sibling's fiancé. She glanced around, lowering her voice. Sophia is devastated. She's been crying all week. Funny, her Instagram shows her partying at that new rooftop bar last night. She looked devastated. You used to be such a good girl, Mom said, shaking her head. What happened to you? I grew up, found my voice, fell in love. Love? She laughed bitterly. You don't know the first thing about love. This is infatuation mixed with revenge. Before I could respond, Brian appeared at my side, placing a protective hand on my lower back. Is everything all right here? He asked, though his tone suggested he knew it wasn't. Brian, Mom's voice turned syrupy sweet. I was just telling Juliet how unexpected this all is. Mrs. Hanson, he said firmly, I care deeply for your daughter. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone. Easier? She clutched her pearls. Do you have any idea what this is doing to our family? To our reputation? Your reputation? I felt something snap inside me. What about my reputation? Being known as Sophia's shadow for 29 years, always the backup plan, the reliable one, the one who cleans up her messes? People were starting to stare. Dad appeared suddenly, his face red with anger. Lower your voice, he ordered. You're making a scene. No, I'm standing up for myself. There's a difference. I took Brian's hand, and I'm done apologizing for being happy. If you leave with him now, Dad warned, don't bother coming home. Brian squeezed my hand. We can go if you want. I looked around the ballroom at all the familiar faces pretending not to watch our family drama unfold. Nathaniel stood by the bar, smirking. A group of Mom's friends whispered behind their hands. And there, by the entrance, Sophia had just arrived, wearing a dress that screamed, "Notice me." No, I said firmly. We're staying. I have every right to be here. Dad's face darkened. Then you leave us no choice. Brian, I'm sure the board would be interested to know about certain irregularities in the company's recent acquisitions. Brian stiffened beside me. Are you threatening me? I'm reminding you that actions have consequences. That's enough. A new voice cut through the tension. Paris stepped forward, her phone held up. I just recorded that entire exchange. I wonder how the board would feel about attempted blackmail. Dad paled. Mom grabbed his arm. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Paris smiled sweetly. I have a whole folder of receipts, texts, emails, recordings of Sophia admitting she planned to leave Brian at the altar weeks before the wedding. Want to test me? A heavy silence fell over our group. Across the room, I saw Sophia freeze, her expression shifting from confidence to panic. Now, Paris continued, I suggest you all return to your tables. The charity auction is about to begin, and I hear there's a lovely vacation package up for bid. My parents retreated, shooting venomous looks over their shoulders. Sophia disappeared into the crowd. That was amazing. I hugged Paris. Thank you. Please, she grinned. I've been waiting years to put them in their place, though I was bluffing about most of those receipts. Brian laughed, wrapping an arm around my waist. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Speaking of sides, Paris nodded toward the stage. Isn't that your company's proposal they're about to present? Brian checked his watch. Yes, and I have an announcement to make. He turned to me. Actually, I have two announcements, one for them and one for you. What do you mean? He took both my hands in his. The board is voting on a new creative director for our digital division. I'm recommending you for the position. Me? I gasped. But I don't even work for your company. But you've been practically running our social media crisis management for the past 2 months. The numbers speak for themselves. People will say, let them, he interrupted. You're qualified, talented, and exactly what we need. Take the job because you deserve it, not because of us. I looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity and love. And the second announcement? He smiled, reaching into his pocket. That one might have to wait until after the auction. Unless you want to steal Sophia's thunder twice in one lifetime? My heart skipped a beat as I realized what he was suggesting. Across the room, I caught Sophia watching us, her face unreadable. The night was far from over. The auction dragged on for what felt like hours. I could feel the weight of Brian's unspoken question hanging between us, the promise of what was in his pocket making my heart race. Finally, the MC announced a brief intermission. Brian squeezed my hand. Meet me on the terrace in 5 minutes? I nodded, watching him disappear through the French doors. Paris appeared at my elbow, practically vibrating with excitement. He's going to propose, isn't he? I think so, I whispered. Is it too soon? Are we crazy? You're asking the wrong questions, Paris said. The real question is, do you love him? More than I thought possible. Then get your butt out there. I turned toward the terrace, but Sophia stepped into my path. Don't do this, she said, her voice trembling. Please, Jules, I'm begging you. Move, Sophia. You don't understand. She grabbed my arm. I made a terrible mistake. I know that now, but Brian and I have history. History you threw away. I pulled free. Why can't you just let me be happy? Because it should be me, she exploded. It's always been me. I'm the pretty one, the successful one, the one everyone loves. The nearby conversation stopped as heads turned our way. You want to do this here? I asked quietly. Fine, let's do it here. Sophia's eyes darted around the room, realizing she'd drawn an audience. She always did love an audience. You think I'm the villain, she said loudly. Poor Juliet, always in my shadow. But you're the one who swooped in the moment I was gone. Gone? I laughed. You mean when you abandoned the man you claimed to love? When you left him to deal with 300 guests, thousands in deposits, and a broken heart, I was confused. No, you were selfish, like always. And now you can't stand that for once. Something good happened to me instead of you. Mom pushed through the crowd. Girls, please. Stay out of this, Mom, I said firmly. For once in your life, just stay out of it. Listen to yourself, Sophia scoffed. You've changed. The old Juliet would never. The old Juliet is gone. She died the day you walked out on your wedding, and I realized I didn't have to live in your shadow anymore. Brian appeared in the terrace doorway, concern etched on his face. The sight of him gave me strength. You want to know the difference between us, Sophia? When you look at Brian, you see a prize to be won. When I look at him, I see the man who taught me I deserve to be loved. How poetic, she sneered. Did you practice that speech in the mirror? Actually, Brian's voice cut through the tension as he joined us. She said something similar to me on our third date, when she was worried she was just a replacement for you. Sophia's face fell. Brian, please, we can fix this. What we had, what we had wasn't real, he said gently. I think I always knew that, but I was too afraid to admit it. With Juliet, everything is real, including this. He turned to me, dropping to one knee. The room collectively gasped. I had a whole speech planned, he said, pulling out a small velvet box, about how you came into my life when I was at my lowest and showed me what true partnership feels like, about how your strength and kindness inspire me every day. Brian, I whispered, tears forming, but seeing you stand up for yourself, for us just now, that said it all. He opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald ring. I love you, Juliet. Marry me? Sophia made a choked sound. Mom clutched Dad's arm. Paris was filming everything on her phone. I looked at the ring, so different from the massive diamond he'd given Sophia, and saw it for what it was, a choice, a new beginning, a life where I wasn't second best. Yes, I said, my voice strong and clear. Yes, I'll marry you. The room erupted in applause as Brian slipped the ring on my finger and pulled me into a kiss. When we broke apart, Sophia was gone, but I barely noticed. I have one condition, I said, touching his face. Anything. A small wedding, just us and a few friends. He laughed, relief and joy mingling in the sound. Deal. Paris rushed forward to hug us both, and even Nathaniel raised his glass in reluctant congratulation. My parents stood frozen, but for once, their approval didn't matter. Ready to face whatever comes next? Brian asked softly. I looked at my ring, then at him, and smiled. With you? Always. The night wasn't over, but our new beginning had already started, and this time no one could overshadow it. The morning after our engagement, I arrived at my parents' house to collect some belongings. I hadn't planned on moving in with Brian so soon, but Dad's ultimatum had made the decision for me. The front door opened before I could knock. Mom stood there, looking like she hadn't slept. Your sister's inside, she warned. She's not well. I'm just here for my things. Please, Juliet, can't we talk about this? I pushed past her into the house. Sophia sat in the living room, still wearing last night's dress, makeup smeared under her eyes. Happy now? She asked, her voice raspy. You've officially taken everything from me. You left everything, I corrected, heading for the stairs. She followed me to my bedroom. I saw the job offer too. Creative director? Really? You're sleeping your way to the top now? I started packing my clothes into a suitcase. I earned that position. Check the company's social media engagement since I started helping. The numbers don't lie. What happened to my sweet little sister? She demanded. The one who used to worship me? I stopped packing and turned to face her. She grew up, realized her worth. found someone who sees her for who she is, not who she's related to. I could destroy you both, she threatened. One word to the board about how you two got together. Go ahead, I challenged. Tell them how you abandoned your fiancé at the altar, how you blocked his number and fled the country, how you're now threatening the company because you can't handle seeing him happy with someone else. You bitch, she spat. No, Sophia, I'm just done being your victim. Dad appeared in the doorway. Your mother's crying downstairs. Of course she is. I zipped up my suitcase. Heaven forbid anyone in this family face the consequences of their actions without Mom's tears making them the victim. We raised you better than this, he said sternly. Did you? I challenged. You raised me to believe I was worth less than Sophia, that her happiness mattered more than mine, that I should be grateful for her leftovers. That's not true. Really? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through photos. My high school graduation, where you left early for Sophia's dance recital. My college acceptance dinner, canceled because Sophia had a modeling emergency. Every birthday, every achievement, overshadowed by whatever drama she created. You're being dramatic, Sophia scoffed. Am I? What about last Christmas when you announced your engagement during my promotion celebration? Or when you scheduled your wedding on the same day as my art show opening? I didn't know. You knew. You always knew. And they, I pointed at our parents, always let you. Mom appeared behind Dad, dabbing her eyes. We only wanted what was best. For Sophia, I finished. Well, guess what? I'm done. I'm done dimming my light so she can shine. I'm done apologizing for my happiness. I'm done being the other daughter. My phone buzzed. A text from Brian. You okay? Need backup? Who's that? Sophia demanded. Brian checking up on his new possession? That's the difference between you and me, I said, typing a quick response. You see relationships as ownership. I see them as partnership. Partnership? She laughed bitterly. Is that what you call stealing my fiancé? I didn't steal anything. I was there when he needed someone. I listened when he talked. I saw him as a person, not a prize. And the job? Dad cut in. How do you explain that? Check the company reports. Ask Nathaniel, who, by the way, hates me, but still admitted I turned their crisis management around. I earned that position. By sleeping with the CEO, Sophia sneered. By working harder than anyone else. By proving myself. By not relying on my looks or my family name or my ability to manipulate people. I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the stairs. At the bottom, I turned back to face my family. I love Brian. He loves me. We're getting married, building a life together, and succeeding on our own terms. You can either accept that and be part of our lives, or you can keep living in Sophia's fantasy world where she's the center of everything. You'll regret this, Sophia called after me. No, I said, opening the front door. For the first time in my life, I don't regret anything. I stepped out into the morning sun, where Brian waited in his car. As I loaded my suitcase into the trunk, I heard Mom calling my name. But I didn't look back. Some chapters need to end for others to begin. Ready? Brian asked as I slid into the passenger seat. I looked at my childhood home, at the family watching from the window, and felt nothing but relief. Ready, I said. Let's go home. The autumn breeze carried the scent of coffee and fresh pastries as I walked into my favorite cafe. Paris was already there, waving from our usual corner table. The social media numbers for the holiday campaign are insane, she said as I sat down. The board is practically falling over themselves to praise you. Even Nathaniel admitted it was brilliant, I grinned, though he looked like he was chewing glass when he said it. Speaking of painful expressions, Paris leaned forward. Have you heard from your family? Mom keeps sending wedding magazines to the office. I return them unopened. And Sophia? I stirred my coffee. According to Instagram, she's finding herself in Bali again. At least she's consistent, Paris snorted. How's the actual wedding planning going? Small ceremony next week, just like we wanted. You, Brian's sister, and a few close friends. Your parents will lose their minds when they find out. They lost that privilege when they chose sides. I showed her the simple white dress photo on my phone. What do you think? It's perfect. Totally you. She hesitated. Someone else thinks so too. I followed her gaze to the cafe entrance. Mom stood there, clutching her purse, looking smaller than I remembered. I'll give you two a minute. Paris squeezed my hand and left. Mom approached slowly, as if afraid I'd bolt. You look well, happy. I am happy. She sat in Paris's vacant chair. I saw the dress in the window at Margaret's bridal. I knew immediately it was meant for you. Mom, please let me finish. She pulled out an envelope. Inside is a letter your grandmother wrote to me before she died. I never showed it to anyone, not even your father. I opened the envelope carefully. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting elegant but shaky. She wrote it after I chose to support your aunt over her in a family dispute. Mom continued. I was wrong then, just like I'm wrong now. I read the letter silently, tears forming as my grandmother's words hit home. She wrote about the price of blind loyalty, the courage it takes to admit mistakes, and the importance of loving your children for who they are, not who you want them to be. I've been a terrible mother to you, Mom said softly. I favored Sophia because she reminded me of myself at her age, always wanting more, never satisfied. But you're like my mother, strong, genuine, kind. Why are you telling me this now? Because I don't want to lose you. Because I saw the woman you've become at the gala, at the house, and I'm in awe. Because I want to be there when you marry the man you love, even if I don't deserve to be. And Dad, Sophia, your father is struggling. Sophia is Sophia, but I'm here for you if you'll let me be. I studied her face, seeing for the first time the toll our family drama had taken. The wedding is next week. Small ceremony, no fuss. Perfect. She smiled through tears. Just like the dress. The cafe door chimed as Brian walked in. He stopped short seeing Mom, his expression concerned. It's okay, I called to him. We're okay. He joined us, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. Mom watched the gesture with understanding eyes. I owe you both an apology, she said. Especially you, Brian, the way we treated you. Water under the bridge, he said kindly. As long as you're here for Juliet now. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. Congratulations, I mean it this time. I showed it to Mom, who smiled sadly. She'll find her way eventually, just like I did. Maybe, I said, but I'm done waiting for her to change. I have my own path now. Brian squeezed my shoulder. Speaking of paths, should we tell her? Tell me what? I placed my hand over Brian's. We're expanding the digital division, opening a new office. I'm running it. As creative director and partner, Brian added proudly. Mom's eyes widened. Partner? I earned it, I said firmly. Every step, every promotion, every success. I know you did, she said. I know that now. Paris returned with fresh coffees for everyone. As we sat there talking, laughing, sharing stories, I felt the last pieces of my old life falling away. The shadow I'd lived in for so long had lifted, revealing something better, a life of my own making. To new beginnings, Brian raised his cup. To being seen, Mom added softly. I looked around at these people, my chosen family and the mother who chose to change, and smiled. To writing our own stories, I said, and making them worth telling.
Outside the window, a pure white snow scene greets the eye. The winter mornings in Alaska always begin with silence. I'm Jessica Miller. Even at 62, I haven't changed my habit of waking up at 5 a.m. every day. Standing in the kitchen, brewing a warm cup of coffee, I gaze out the window at the view of Miller's orchard spread before me. I'm reminded of over 40 years ago when my husband Robert and I started this orchard. In this small town near Fairbanks, everyone said, "It's too cold for anything to grow." But we didn't give up. After much trial and error, we found apple varieties that could withstand the cold and even succeeded in growing berries. Now, our orchard has become a fixture at the local farmers market, and in summer, it's bustling with tourists. It makes me so happy when everyone tells me how exceptionally sweet our fruit is after surviving the harsh winter. As I'm preparing breakfast, I hear footsteps coming down the stairs. "Good morning, Grandma," comes a cheerful voice. It's my granddaughter Emily. "Good morning, Emily. Did you sleep well?" "Yes. I have something exciting at school today." Emily, 8 years old, is the only daughter of my son Michael and his wife Sarah. They all live together with us in the big house on the orchard. A little while later, my husband Robert comes down. "Good morning, Jess," he smiles at me gently. Even at 65, his smile hasn't changed from 40 years ago. "It's delivery day today, isn't it?" I say. "Yes, I'm heading to Fairbanks Co-op." "I should be back by evening," Robert replies. After breakfast, once Emily has left for school, I put on my rubber boots and head out to the orchard. It's my daily routine to check on the apple trees in the snow. During winter, the trees are dormant, but we can't neglect preparations for spring. Around noon, my son Michael comes to the office. "Mom, I've finished this year's financial report," he says, looking a bit tired. "Thank you, Michael. You're always working so hard." "Yes," he answers vaguely. I've been worried about Michael lately. His relationship with his wife Sarah doesn't seem as good as it used to be. In the afternoon, I attend a gathering of the gardening club at the local community center. "Jessica, you'll teach us how to make apple jam again this year, won't you?" my longtime friend Mary asks me. "Of course. Let's all have fun making it together," I reply, feeling the importance of our community connections. In the evening, we all go to Emily's school event, a winter music concert. Seeing my 8-year-old granddaughter on stage warms my heart. However, I sense a subtle tension between Michael and Sarah sitting next to me, which worries me a little. On the way home, Robert praises Emily, "That was a wonderful performance." We all laugh together, enjoying this simple moment of happiness. But somehow, a small worry lingers in the back of my mind. Will these peaceful days continue? Several weeks have passed since that music concert, and the Alaskan winter has grown even harsher. As I drink my morning coffee and look outside, I see the snow falling heavily. The thermometer reads 10 degrees Fahrenheit. "It's particularly cold today," I mutter to myself while gazing at the orchard through the kitchen window. The snow-covered trees stand silently, as if wrapped in a white blanket. Despite the severe cold, today is my day to pick up Emily from after-school care. I had promised to pick her up at 4 p.m. from the YMCA winter break program. Robert, I'll be picking up Emily today, I call out to my husband. Oh, that's right. Be careful out there, Robert answers. He seems to be organizing some documents in his study. Looking at the clock, I see it's already past 3 p.m. I should get ready, I think to myself, putting on my coat and grabbing the car keys. As I step outside, the cold wind stings my cheeks. I quickly get into the car and try to start the engine. However, when I turn the key, nothing happens. That's odd. I think, trying a few more times, but there's no response. Feeling uneasy, I get out of the car and call out to Robert. Robert, it seems the car battery might be dead. He looks a bit surprised and says, that happens often on days this cold. It's an old car, after all. But I need to pick up Emily, I say, feeling anxious. Robert offers, should I go instead? No, it's all right. Don't you have an appointment to get your watch repaired today? I remind him. Robert is a collector of old pocket watches and had mentioned going to the town watchmaker today. Oh, that's right. I completely forgot, Robert says, lightly tapping his forehead. But if Jess's car isn't working, I'll borrow Michael's car, I suggest. My son is working from home today. I go back inside and knock on Michael's door upstairs. Michael, do you have a moment? What is it, Mom? Michael pokes his head out. The car battery is dead. Can I borrow your car to pick up Emily? Michael seems to think for a moment. Ah, I see. Sure, go ahead, he says, handing me his car keys. Thank you. I'll be back soon, I say as I head down the stairs. When I return to the entrance, Robert is still there. Everything okay? He asks. Yes, I'm going to use Michael's car, I answer. For a moment, I thought I saw Robert's expression cloud over. Was it my imagination? I see. Be careful out there, Robert says. I get into Michael's car and start the engine. It starts up fine, and I feel relieved. I see Robert's figure in the rearview mirror as I drive off. The trip to the YMCA usually takes about 20 minutes. However, with the heavy snow and poor visibility today, I need to drive carefully. On the way, I feel like the car isn't handling as well as usual. Is it just my imagination? I wonder, but an uneasy feeling creeps into my chest. When I arrive at the YMCA, Emily is waving energetically from inside the building. I get her into the car, check her seatbelt, and we set off. Grandma, guess what? I made a snowman today. Emily starts excitedly. Oh, did you have fun? I reply, but in my heart, an indescribable anxiety is growing. Robert's behavior, the condition of Michael's car, and today's unusually cold weather. I can't shake the feeling that something is off. As we head home, I take a deep breath. I hope this ominous feeling is just me being overly worried. With that wish, I slowly drive on. About 15 minutes after leaving the YMCA, we reach the road along the Yukon River. The snow is still falling heavily, and even with the wipers at full speed, it's hard to see clearly ahead. The white world spreading out on both sides is beautiful, but in our current situation, it feels a bit eerie. "Emily, are you cold?" I call out to my granddaughter in the back seat. "I'm okay, Grandma. But you know." Emily's voice sounds a bit clouded. "What is it?" "Grandma, this car feels strange." Emily's words make my heart skip a beat. The truth is, I've been feeling something off since we left. The steering wheel vibration seems stronger than usual, and the engine sound oddly irregular. "Strange how?" I ask, trying to stay as calm as possible. "There's a clunking sound. Daddy's car doesn't usually make that noise." Hearing Emily's words, my unease turns into certainty. Something is wrong. It might be dangerous to continue driving like this. Just then, I spot a small parking area ahead. It's a viewpoint for the Yukon River. Usually, it would be crowded with tourists, but on a day with such bad weather, no one is there. "Emily, we're going to take a little break," I say as I pull into the parking space. When I turn off the engine, silence envelopes the car. Outside, the snow is still falling heavily, but from inside the car, it looks like soft cotton fluff drifting down. I take a deep breath and try to clear my head. I've decided it's too dangerous to continue driving. But walking home in this snow is impossible too. "Emily, Grandma is going to call a taxi. Can you wait a little longer?" "Okay, I understand," Emily nods obediently. I take out my smartphone and call the local taxi company, Fairbanks Cab. Fortunately, they say they can pick us up in about 30 minutes. A taxi will be here soon. Until then, let's chat, shall we? I say to Emily. "Yeah. Hey Grandma, today at the YMCA." As I listen to Emily's story, various thoughts run through my mind. Why is Michael's car in this condition? Is it just a coincidence, or? 30 minutes later, I see the taxi's headlights. The driver gets out and checks the situation. "Ma'am, it's dangerous to keep going like this. You did the right thing by stopping and calling us." Hearing those words, I felt a chill run down my spine. If Emily hadn't noticed. As we get into the taxi, I look back at Michael's car. Tomorrow, I need to have it properly inspected. And I need to talk to my family. "Emily, you did well to notice." "Thank you," I gently pat my granddaughter's head. As the taxi starts moving, my heart is filled with deep anxiety and fear of the truth that awaits us. When the taxi stopped in front of our house, the day was already beginning to fade. The snow had finally let up, and the warm light leaking from the house windows reflected beautifully on the snow-covered ground. "Emily, we're here," I call out, and my granddaughter nods, rubbing her sleepy eyes. After paying the taxi driver and thanking him, we get out. Suddenly, the door flies open and Robert rushes out. "Jessica." "Emily." His voice is clearly agitated. Robert's expression changes from surprise to confusion, and for just a moment, disappointment. It seemed to flash across his face. "How are you safe?" a whisper escapes from Robert's lips. Those words sent a chill down my spine. Something is decidedly wrong. "Robert, what do you mean?" I ask, trying to maintain my composure. "Oh, no. I was just worried." With this terrible weather, he hurriedly tries to cover up, but his eyes remain fixed on us. "Emily, go inside. You must be cold," I urge my granddaughter into the house. Once Emily is inside, I turn back to Robert. "About the car, we need to have it checked properly tomorrow. It started acting up on the way." "I see." Robert's reaction feels oddly detached. As we enter the house, Michael comes down the stairs. "Mom, Emily, you made it back safely." His voice seems to mix relief and anxiety. "Yes, but is your car all right? It started acting strange on the way." "Oh, that. I haven't had it checked recently," Michael answers, averting his eyes. "That night, I couldn't sleep." Robert's reaction, Michael's attitude, and the condition of the car. Everything felt unnatural, as if some big secret was being hidden. Past midnight, as I was heading to the kitchen feeling thirsty, I heard small voices leaking from the study. "It failed. Why didn't those brakes work?" It's Robert's voice. "I don't know. I was sure I had disabled them." This time it's Michael's voice. The voice of my son. "Next time, we need a more foolproof method." "But Dad, is this really okay?" "Mom and Emily." "Shut up. You have debts too, don't you?" The orchard's financial troubles are serious. If we can just get the insurance money, everything will work out. I held my breath. I couldn't believe my ears. But the conversation I heard was clear. My husband and son were trying to take my life and Emily's. My legs felt weak, and I leaned against the wall. My mind went blank. I can't believe it. I don't want to believe it. But this is reality. Quietly, I returned to my room and closed the door. Tears streamed down my cheeks. My husband of over 40 years, the son I gave birth to. These two were trying to take our lives. Why? The orchard's financial troubles. Debts. I can't even imagine how bad the situation must be. But even so, to try to kill family members. Emily's innocent 8-year-old sleeping face comes to mind. I must protect her. But how? Should I go to the police? But there's no evidence. Would I have to report my own family? As the morning sun begins to shine through the window, I finally make up my mind. First, gather evidence. And ensure Emily's safety. Love for my family and the sadness of betrayal. The fear of protecting myself and the determination to protect Emily. Conflicting emotions clash in my chest. I close my eyes and take a deep breath. The road ahead will be tough. But I must reveal the truth and do what's right. With the morning sun, I quietly get up from bed with a new resolve. From that night until the next morning, I stayed awake gathering evidence. A recording device hidden in Robert's pocket watch, the history on Michael's computer, and Sarah's unnatural behavior. Everything confirmed my worst fears. First thing in the morning, I headed to the local Fairbanks police station. As I entered the station, my hands were shaking with nervousness. "How can I help you?" the receptionist officer asked. "I think my family is trying to take my life. I have evidence." Hearing these words, the officer showed a surprised expression. Immediately, a detective who seemed to be a veteran was called, and I was guided to a separate room. "Mrs. Miller, please calm down and tell me everything from the beginning, in order." Taking a deep breath, I started to tell everything. The conversation between my husband and son, the unnatural car breakdown, and the evidence I had gathered. "The car I left by the Yukon River is urgent," I emphasized. "The perpetrators might try to destroy the evidence." The detective understood the gravity of my words and immediately gave instructions to his subordinates. "Head to the scene right away and secure the car. Evidence preservation is the top priority." A few hours later, I received a call from the police. "We've successfully secured the car." As expected, the brakes had been deliberately cut. Hearing this report, the last hope in me vanished. I felt like I was being confronted with the reality of the situation once again. After that, the police investigation progressed rapidly. Emily and I took refuge in a safe place and fully cooperated with the investigation. A few days later, the whole picture became clear. At the police station, I received a detailed report from the detective in charge. "Mrs. Miller, I'm going to share the results of our investigation." The detective's expression was stern, but also showed a hint of sympathy. "Yes." My voice was trembling. The brakes of the secured car were indeed deliberately cut. It seems to have been a meticulous plan to stage an accident on the snowy road. I held my breath at those words. Furthermore, we found evidence of conspiracy between your husband, Mr. Robert, and your son, Mr. Michael. There were email exchanges between the two and suspicious movements in their bank accounts. The detective paused for a moment, gauging my reaction. I nodded for him to continue. "Regarding the motive, it seems the orchard's management was in a dire situation. Harvest yields had drastically decreased due to abnormal weather in recent years, leading to substantial debt. Moreover, Mr. Michael had separate debts as well." I had no idea about any of this," I said. "Yes. And it seems they had their eyes on your and your granddaughter's high-value life insurance policies. They probably thought all their problems would be solved if they could get the insurance money." I couldn't hold back my tears. I had worked so hard for my family. Why didn't they come to me for help? And the detective hesitates a bit before continuing. "We've discovered that Mr. Michael's wife, Mrs. Sarah, was also aware of this plan." "Sarah too." My heart was completely shattered. Mrs. Sarah wasn't directly involved, but she knew about the plan and didn't stop it. Rather, it seems she was in agreement with it. After hearing everything, I let out a deep sigh. What happens now? Mr. Robert and Mr. Michael will be arrested for attempted murder and attempted insurance fraud. Mrs. Sarah will likely be questioned on suspicion of conspiracy. Reality weighs heavily on me. The betrayal by my family, the orchard's crisis, and our future life. However, remembering Emily's smile, I renewed my determination. I vowed in my heart to overcome this ordeal and build a new life. Following the police investigation results, the prosecution swiftly moved to press charges. When the trial began, local media reported extensively, throwing our small town into turmoil. When I first faced Robert, Michael, and Sarah in court, my heart was filled with complex emotions. Those who were once my beloved family now sat in the defendant's box. The trial lasted for several weeks, and I took the witness stand. While speaking, I kept Emily's face in my mind, mustering all my courage. On the day of the final arguments, the prosecutor demanded severe sentences. The defense pleaded for leniency, but the evidence was clear. On the day of the verdict, the judge sentenced Robert to 15 years and Michael to 10 years in prison. Sarah received a 2-year suspended sentence. After the sentencing, Robert looked at me and said in a faint voice, "Jessica, I'm truly sorry. I was so caught up in the business." Michael also apologized tearfully, "Mom, the debts kept piling up, and I didn't know what to do." However, their words didn't reach my heart. As I was leaving the courthouse, Emily squeezed my hand and said, "Grandma, let's do our best together. Everyone loves your apple jam." Those words brought tears to my eyes that I couldn't hold back. When we returned home, I had to face the orchard's debts and management issues. As I was at a loss, our neighbor Martha introduced me to the Alaska Legal Services Corporation. "They'll surely help you. If you explain your situation, you should be able to get appropriate advice," Martha said. Encouraged by Martha's words, I contacted the Alaska Legal Services Corporation the next day. Speaking with a lawyer who listened attentively to my story, I felt a glimmer of hope. "Mrs. Miller, let's start by proceeding with the divorce and removing Michael from the orchard's management," the lawyer suggested. Hearing those words, I let out a deep breath. Divorcing my husband of over 40 years. Parting ways with my son. While my heart felt constricted, I knew I had to move forward, for Emily's sake and my own. "I understand. Please proceed," I answered. The following months were filled with legal procedures. However, unexpected support also came our way. The local community rallied to help rebuild the orchard. "Jessica, if there's anything we can do, just let us know," my longtime friend Mary said. She was the president of the local gardening club and gathered many volunteers. One morning, when I arrived at the orchard, more than 20 people from the community had gathered. Everyone was holding shovels and buckets, ready to help. "Everyone, thank you." I choked up with emotion. From that day on, the orchard began to transform little by little. With the help of the community, we pruned old trees and planted new saplings. An organic farming expert gave us advice on soil improvement, and students from the local university's agriculture department came to help as part of their research. Emily also eagerly helped out. "Grandma, this apple tree will surely grow big by the time I'm grown up," she said, looking at a sapling with hope-filled eyes. Legal issues were also gradually resolved. With the help of the Alaska Legal Services Corporation, we proceeded with the divorce from Robert and completely removed Michael from the orchard's management. However, many challenges still remained. Repaying debts, finding new distribution channels, and above all, securing Emily's future. But there was no turning back now. "Emily, you know what? Grandma has a new idea," I said to my granddaughter one day. "I'm thinking of starting an agritourism business at our orchard. How about apple picking and jam making experiences?" Emily's eyes lit up. "Wow, that's amazing. I want to be in charge of explaining about apples to the customers." Hearing those words, I could smile from the bottom of my heart. For this child, I can overcome any difficulty. I was sure of it. Rebuilding the orchard wasn't an easy journey. There were times when I felt like giving up. But Emily's smile and the support from the community became my emotional pillars. And slowly but surely, Miller's Orchard was reborn into a new form. 5 years have passed since then. Miller's Orchard has changed beyond recognition. Today, the Fairbanks Farmers Market is bustling as usual. "Jessica, the taste of this year's apple pie is exceptional," a regular customer calls out with a smile. Emily, now 13 years old, is enthusiastically explaining apple varieties to tourists. Her bright smile seems to heal the hearts of visitors. The other day, Michael, who was recently released on parole, visited the orchard. At first, I was hesitant, but after hearing his sincere apology and determination to rehabilitate, we've begun to walk the path of reconciliation little by little. I received a letter from Robert saying he's participating in gardening therapy in prison. He wrote that he wants to work in the orchard after his release. That decision is still difficult for me, but I don't intend to completely close the door. Life is full of unexpected turns. But surrounded by the people we love and this beautiful orchard, we are surely grasping happiness. The gentle rays of the morning sun peeked through the window, gently waking me. Glancing at the clock, I saw it wasn't even 6 a.m. yet. The habit of rising early, ingrained from years of teaching, hadn't changed even after retirement. As I slowly rose from bed and opened the window, a refreshing spring breeze caressed my cheeks. "Well, let's do our best today too," I murmured to myself, as if trying to boost my own spirits. My name is Martha Thompson. I'm 62 years old now. I taught English at the local high school for 35 years before retiring 2 years ago. These days, I live with my son Robert, his wife Sarah, and my adorable 5-year-old grandson Jimmy. While preparing breakfast, my thoughts drift to my family. Robert works for a local construction company. He's earnest and hardworking, but lately, he's been looking a bit worn out. Sarah is a kind and thoughtful daughter-in-law. She's a full-time homemaker, dedicated to housework and childcare. And then there's Jimmy. Just seeing that child's smile warms my heart. "Good morning, Grandma," I turned around to find Jimmy still in his pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Good morning, Jimmy." "You're up early," I said. I picked up my grandson and kissed him on the cheek. The soft scent of his hair reminded me of the youthfulness of my former students. Breakfast time. The sight of my family gathered around the table fills me with happiness. However, lately, I've been sensing something off. The warmth between Robert and Sarah doesn't seem the same as before. After finishing breakfast and seeing Jimmy off to kindergarten, I start tending to the garden. As I care for the flowers, I'm reminded of my former students. Watching them grow was one of the great joys of my life. And now, I'm deeply grateful for the time I get to spend with my beloved family. Finishing up in the garden, I return to the house to find Sarah lost in thought in the living room. Her expression seemed tinged with sadness, as if she had something weighing on her mind. "Sarah, is everything all right?" I gently called out to her. Sarah looked up, a bit startled, and forced a smile. "Oh, Martha. I'm fine, just thinking about some things." I sat down next to her and gently placed my hand on her shoulder. "You've seemed troubled lately. Would you like to talk about it?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before letting out a deep sigh. "Actually, I'm worried about Robert." Her words sent a wave of anxiety through my chest. "What do you mean?" "Robert's been acting strange lately. I don't know if it's work stress, but he's been coming home late, and when he is home, he seems irritable." There were tears glistening in Sarah's eyes. I squeezed her hand. "I see. Come to think of it, Robert has seemed a bit different lately." Sarah continued, "And it seems to be affecting Jimmy too. Yesterday, Jimmy said, 'Daddy's scary.'" Hearing those words broke my heart. I could feel cracks forming in our precious family. "Sarah, what specific changes have you noticed in Robert?" I asked quietly. Sarah thought for a moment before answering. "He's been taking phone calls in secret, suddenly going out more often. And he's grown cold towards me too." As I listened silently to Sarah's story, I reflected on Robert's recent behavior. Indeed, he had become more taciturn and seemed to be spending less time with the family. "Have you tried talking to Robert about this?" I asked, and Sarah shook her head sadly. "I've tried, but he just says, 'It's just work being busy,' and brushes me off." Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Jimmy had returned from kindergarten. "Mommy." "Grandma," his cheerful voice rang out. Sarah quickly wiped her eyes and put on a smile. "Welcome home, Jimmy. Did you have fun today?" Jimmy began happily recounting his day at kindergarten, but I noticed a shadow of anxiety in his eyes. I didn't miss this change in my grandson. That night, at the dinner table, Robert came home late and began eating in silence. The family conversation lacked its usual warmth and felt awkward. After dinner, Jimmy sat on my lap and said in a small voice, "Grandma, I wish Daddy and Mommy would make up." Those words tightened my chest. As I gently embraced Jimmy, I wondered what I could do to protect my family's happiness. That morning began like any other ordinary day. However, deep in my heart, I felt an ominous premonition swirling. At the breakfast table, Sarah's chair was the only one empty. When I asked, "Where's Sarah?" Robert answered expressionlessly, "Seems she left early." His attitude struck me as odd, but I didn't press further. All day long, there was no word from Sarah. As evening approached, a heavy rain began to fall outside. As the wind howled and trees swayed violently, my anxiety only grew. "Robert, hasn't Sarah come back yet?" I asked. He avoided eye contact and curtly replied, "She's probably working late." As night fell, the storm intensified. My heart raced to the sound of rain pelting the windows and distant thunder. Suddenly, I heard Robert cry out, "Jimmy!" We frantically searched the house, but Jimmy was nowhere to be found. "He might have gone outside," Robert said. Trembling with fear, I grabbed a flashlight, put on a raincoat, and dashed outside. Beaten by the fierce rain and wind, I searched the garden. "Jimmy! Jimmy!" I called out repeatedly, but there was no response. Then, I spotted the old doghouse in the corner of the garden. From there, I could faintly hear the sound of sobbing. "Jimmy!" I called out as I approached the doghouse. Peering inside, I found Jimmy sitting there, shivering. "Grandma," Jimmy said in a tearful voice. I quickly scooped Jimmy up and carried him back to the house. Robert was waiting at the entrance, but his expression was strangely calm. In the living room, I wrapped Jimmy in a blanket and gave him a warm drink. Gently, I asked, "Why did you go outside?" Jimmy answered in a trembling voice, "Daddy, to Mommy." "What did Daddy do to Mommy?" I asked, holding my breath. And then, Jimmy's next words changed my world completely. "Daddy pushed Mommy into the incinerator." In that moment, my mind went blank. Jimmy's words echoed in my head as if in slow motion. "What do you mean?" I asked in a shaky voice. Jimmy continued between sobs, "Daddy and Mommy were fighting loudly, then Daddy dragged Mommy to the incinerator." I was at a loss for words. Looking at Robert next to me, I saw his face had turned pale. "No, that's not." Robert mumbled, but his voice lacked conviction. From that night on, my world changed completely. Even as morning came, it felt like last night's nightmare was still continuing. At the breakfast table, Sarah's seat was empty as usual. Jimmy sat silently, not touching his food. Robert was restless, constantly checking the clock. I took a deep breath and made a decision. "Robert, I'm going to call the police." Robert looked up, startled. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "Sarah will surely come back. There's no need for the police." "But what Jimmy said—" "That's a misunderstanding." Robert raised his voice. Jimmy, frightened by this, hid behind me. With trembling hands, I picked up the phone and called the police. "Yes, my daughter-in-law is missing." And I continued, choosing my words carefully, "There's a possibility that my son may have harmed his wife." After I hung up, Robert was looking at me with eyes full of anger. Why would you? However, his words were interrupted by the doorbell. The police had arrived surprisingly quickly. 2 officers entered the house. They carefully assessed the situation and began asking detailed questions about Sarah's disappearance. You haven't seen your wife since yesterday morning? One officer asked Robert. Robert answered nervously, yes, she seemed to have left early. The other officer began asking about the incinerator. I didn't miss how Robert's face tensed for a moment. The officers went out to the garden to examine the incinerator. Meanwhile, I held Jimmy, trying to comfort him. Grandma, I'm scared, Jimmy said in a small voice. It's okay, Jimmy. Grandma's here with you, I answered, but I could feel my own voice trembling. When the officers returned, they began asking Robert more questions with serious expressions. Robert's answers seemed vague and sometimes contradictory. That afternoon, the police announced they would launch a full investigation. They asked for a photo of Sarah, so I began searching for her album. As I looked through the album, I steeled my resolve. Not only would I rely on the police investigation, but I also needed to uncover the truth myself. For Sarah's sake, and for Jimmy's. As the sun was rising, the police forensics team arrived. They headed towards the incinerator in the garden and carefully began their investigation. I watched from the window, unable to calm my racing heart. Robert paced back and forth in the room, clearly agitated. This is concerning, what will the neighbors think, he muttered. I found his words unsettling. It sounded as if he was more worried about the neighbors' gossip than his wife's well-being. A few hours later, the head of the forensics team entered the house. His expression was grim, and my heart began to race. We found what appears to be human bones in the incinerator, he said quietly. At those words, the air in the room seemed to freeze. Robert collapsed into a chair, covering his face with his hands. However, the forensic officer continued, further tests are needed to determine if these bones are recent and if they belong to the victim. With a trembling voice, I asked, how long will that take? DNA testing can take anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. We'll rush it, but we need time to get accurate results. That afternoon, the police took Robert to the station for questioning. As he left, I thought I saw fear and regret in his eyes. Jimmy clung to me anxiously. Grandma, where is Daddy going? It's okay, Jimmy. Daddy's just going to talk with the police for a bit, I answered gently, but I could feel my voice shaking. That night, a neighbor came to visit. The news of Sarah's disappearance had already spread throughout the town. Martha, I'm so sorry about what's happened, my neighbor Janet said. Actually, I saw Sarah's car on the night she disappeared. I caught my breath. Where did you see it? Near the old warehouse on the outskirts of town. But it wasn't Sarah driving, it was Robert? I asked. Janet nodded. Yes, it was definitely Robert. But he was alone. This new information left my head spinning. Where was Sarah, and did Robert really After receiving this information from Janet, I contacted the police. They immediately began searching the warehouse on the outskirts of town. That evening, I received a call from the police. "Mrs. Thompson, we've found someone who appears to be Sarah in the basement of the warehouse. We're in the process of rescuing her now." My heart raced at those words. "Is she alive?" I asked, holding my breath. "Yes, she's conscious but seems to be in a weakened state. We'll transport her to the hospital immediately." I rushed to the hospital. When I arrived, a police officer was waiting for me. "Sarah's condition is stable. However, she seems to have been through quite an ordeal," he explained. When I entered the hospital room, Sarah was lying in bed. She looked thin, pale, and had dark circles under her eyes. But she was alive. That fact alone brought tears to my eyes. "Sarah." I took her hand. Sarah weakly opened her eyes and looked at me. "Martha." Her voice was hoarse. "It's okay, you're safe now," I said gently. After Sarah calmed down a bit, she slowly began to speak. "Robert, he locked me in the basement. He." She choked on her words, and I gently squeezed her hand. "At first, he threatened to throw me into the incinerator. But instead, he put me in the basement." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "Why would he do such a thing?" I asked. Sarah let out a deep sigh. "Because I found out about his affair." He panicked. At that moment, a police officer entered the room. "Sarah, can we talk to you?" Sarah nodded, and I held her hand as I listened to her testimony. The details of Robert's affair, how Sarah had found evidence, and how Robert had threatened her and eventually locked her in the basement all came to light. When she finished speaking, the police officer said quietly, "Robert has already been arrested. We're still investigating the bones found in the incinerator." Sarah asked in a trembling voice, "Jimmy? Is Jimmy okay?" "Jimmy is fine," I reassured her. "I'm taking care of him now." Sarah closed her eyes in relief. "Thank you, Martha." As I left the hospital room that night, I renewed my determination. From now on, I would protect Sarah and Jimmy, and walk a new path in life with them. While Sarah was recovering in the hospital, I continued my efforts to uncover the truth. With each visit to her hospital room, Sarah gradually shared more about the terrifying events of those days. I found messages on Robert's phone from an unfamiliar woman, Sarah began in a shaky voice. At first, I wanted to believe it was nothing. But I nodded quietly at her words. "So, you confronted Robert?" Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Yes." But he flew into a rage. That was the beginning of it all. From Sarah's testimony, the existence of Robert's mistress came to light. Her name was Carol, a colleague from Robert's workplace. As the police investigation progressed, new facts emerged. Carol had also been reported missing a few weeks earlier. A missing person report was filed for Carol, the detective in charge informed me. The timing of her disappearance is close to when Sarah was confined. This information weighed even heavier on my heart. What had Robert done? And the bones found in the incinerator. I decided to gather information from the local community as well. I visited the town library and the cafe Sarah frequented, talking to people. Mary, the librarian, had some interesting information. Just before Sarah disappeared, I saw her having a heated argument with a woman named Carol, Mary said. They were both upset, and I remember Carol shouting, "Stay away from him." Jennifer, a waitress at the cafe, also provided crucial testimony. That day, I saw Robert with Carol. They seemed very intimate. As I gathered this information, the outline of the incident gradually became clearer in my mind. However, big questions remained. Where was Carol? And did Robert really? Every night, I compiled this information in my notebook, forming as many hypotheses as possible. As sleepless nights continued, I vowed not to give up until I reached the truth. For Jimmy's sake, for Sarah's sake, and for our entire family, I had to uncover the truth. That thought kept me going. The truth came to light just before Robert's trial was set to begin. After consulting with his lawyer, Robert decided to confess to all his crimes. I listened to Robert's confession at the police station. His face was haggard, and the light had gone from his eyes. "Mom, I'll tell you everything," Robert said in a thin voice. Robert and Carol's relationship had begun about a year ago. It started with casual conversations and eventually deepened into a serious affair. Things with Sarah had cooled off. "Carol understood me," Robert explained. "But it was a mistake." The situation took a drastic turn the night Sarah discovered the affair. Sarah confronted Robert and demanded a separation. Panicking, Robert threatened Sarah and locked her in the basement. I wanted time. Time to think," Robert continued in a trembling voice. But the most shocking truth was yet to come. Robert began to speak painfully about Carol's disappearance. That night, Carol came to the house. She said she wanted to talk about Sarah. Robert's eyes filled with tears. But we argued. Robert and Carol's argument escalated, and he accidentally pushed her down the stairs. "Carol," she stopped moving. I got scared. Robert covered his face with his hands. In a panic, Robert tried to dispose of Carol's body in the incinerator. And in the process, Jimmy witnessed it. When Jimmy saw me, I didn't know what to do anymore. As I listened to Robert's confession, I was at a loss for words. The terrible crime my son had committed. And how he had imprisoned Sarah and destroyed our family to hide that crime. "I threatened Sarah, to hide everything," Robert said finally. "But I'm not running away anymore. I'll take responsibility for everything." After finishing his confession, Robert hung his head low. I looked at him with mixed emotions. As anger, sadness, and love for my son intermingled, I thought about the long road ahead. A few days after Robert's confession, he was formally arrested and sent to court. I watched from in front of the police station as Robert, now in handcuffs, got into the police vehicle. His back was hunched, and there was no trace left of my once proud son. Mom, I'm sorry, he said, turning back before getting into the car. Those words tore my heart to pieces. Sarah was discharged from the hospital and came to recuperate at our house. Her eyes held deep sadness, but also a glimmer of new determination. Martha, I'm so grateful you're here, Sarah said, holding my hand. I don't know what to do from here. We'll get through this together, I replied. For Jimmy's sake too. Jimmy didn't fully understand what had happened, but he was keenly aware of the change in the family atmosphere. He became more clingy than before, especially afraid to sleep alone at night. Grandma, is Daddy never coming back? Jimmy asked one night. Jimmy, Daddy is going to be away for a while, I answered gently. But we're here. Mommy, Grandma, we're right here with you, okay? As the days passed, we slowly began to look forward. Sarah started receiving psychological counseling, and Jimmy began attending a new daycare. While supporting them, I also faced my own emotional wounds. One evening, as the three of us sat in the garden, Jimmy suddenly burst out laughing. It felt like the most beautiful music I'd heard in this house in a long time. Sarah and I looked at each other and smiled softly. In that moment, I was certain we would overcome this ordeal and walk together as a new family. Well, shall we prepare dinner? I stood up. I'll help, Sarah followed. Jimmy jumped up happily, shouting, I'll help too. This is where our new life begins. It was 5 a.m., and the sun hadn't fully risen yet. On my way home from the hospital, my car's headlights illuminated the dim road ahead. I rubbed my tired eyes while gripping the steering wheel, feeling somewhat relieved knowing I'd be home soon. The drive home after night shifts was always a quiet time. My name is Ashley Watson. I've been working as a pediatrician at the city hospital for 10 years now. My brown hair, which reaches my shoulders, still bears the clear marks from wearing a hairband at the hospital. My makeup is starting to fade, but I don't have the energy to touch it up before getting home. As I parked in the garage, I noticed a soft light seeping through the second-floor window. Sophia must be awake. It was unusual for her to be up at this hour. I'm home, I called out. I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. My 14-year-old daughter appeared, her long black hair swaying, wearing her glasses. Welcome home, Mom. I woke up early today, Sophia said with a slightly apologetic expression. But for me, coming off a night shift, being able to talk with my daughter this early in the morning was an unexpected gift. Our house is located in a quiet residential area in the suburbs of Minneapolis. It's a 20-year-old single-family home that I bought with the divorce settlement 7 years ago. Not too big, not too small, just the right size for a mother and daughter. Shall I make breakfast? I'll make it. Mom, you should go take a shower. Watching Sophia's back as she stood in the kitchen, I felt proud of how much she'd grown. Now in 8th grade, she had become quite capable with household chores. She was responsible for washing dishes and cleaning her room, and lately, she'd shown interest in cooking too. After showering and changing clothes, the aroma of toast wafted from the kitchen. The table was set with sunny-side-up eggs, salad, and hot coffee. "Thank you, this looks delicious." Was the night shift tough? We had 2 emergency cases. But both patients pulled through. Sophia always shows understanding about my work as a doctor. For days of being on call each week, 6 night shifts per month. Our irregular schedule often limits the time we can spend together. That's why we treasure the time we do have together. We've made it a habit to always eat dinner together, and on weekends, we cook together or go shopping. "Hey, Mom," Sophia said while breaking off a piece of toast. "For my next art assignment, we have to draw a family portrait." "Oh? What kind of picture will you draw?" "I haven't decided yet." She pushed up her glasses thoughtfully. "Maybe you working at the hospital." Those words made my heart warm. I wondered how my daughter saw me. Sophia has an artistic sense. Though introverted and quiet, she comes alive when drawing. She's passionate about her activities in the art club, and her teachers think highly of her work. "Oh, that reminds me," I said. "Your dad's going to call next Saturday." Sophia's hands paused for a moment. Her relationship with her father, James, is complicated. I married him 10 years ago when I was a medical resident at the university hospital. He was a successful investment banker who became so absorbed in his work that he neglected our family. With frequent business trips and prioritizing his career over family time. When Sophia was 7, we decided to divorce. I got custody, and he pays child support regularly. However, father and daughter only meet about twice a year. "Okay. I understand." Sophia's response was matter-of-fact, but I could sense her mixed feelings. After the divorce, she suddenly started showing more mature expressions. Looking at the clock, it was already past 6 a.m. "Sophia, we should start getting ready. You have morning art club activities today, right?" "Yes. I'm continuing work on my oil painting." My daughter's voice lifted slightly. Seeing moments like these reassured me that I had made the right choice. Even if we didn't fit the ideal family model, we had built our own kind of happiness. I could hear Sophia going back upstairs to change into her uniform. I hurriedly touched up my makeup. Concealing fatigue with makeup had become a habit. The morning sun began streaming through the windows. As if announcing the start of a new day, gentle filtered sunlight softly illuminated our home. As I began another day as both a mother and a doctor, I wished this peaceful daily life would continue forever. As the seasons shifted from spring to early summer, my work had entered a fulfilling period. My reputation in the pediatrics department was excellent, with strong trust from patients. Recently, the department head had even approached me about a promotion to chief resident. "Dr. Watson, the patient in examination room 3 is ready." Nodding to the new nurse's voice, I reviewed the chart. In the examination room, a 5-year-old boy waited with his mother. When he saw me, he gripped his mother's hand tightly, looking a bit nervous. "What seems to be the matter?" I asked gently, and the boy gradually began to relax. It was the accumulation of such daily consultations that had led to my current reputation. As a single mother, balancing work and parenting hadn't been easy, but I was living a fulfilling life without financial concerns. "Doctor, my child really loves you. the mother said with a smile after the examination. Earning children's trust is the greatest joy as a doctor. My reputation at the hospital continued to grow. I was recently appointed as a mentor for young doctors. Though it meant more responsibility, I found it rewarding. My colleagues trusted me deeply, and our teamwork was well known throughout the hospital. Sophia was also doing well in middle school. She was immersed in art club activities and maintained high grades. Though she didn't have many close friends, she seemed to be managing school life at her own pace. On holidays, we would go shopping at the Mall of America or watch movies together. Last weekend, we went to Target to buy new art supplies at Sophia's request. Her passion for art seemed to grow stronger by the day. "Mom, I want this paint set." "That's fine. But haven't art supplies been getting expensive lately?" "It's okay," she said with a smile. But somewhere in that expression, I thought I saw a shadow that hadn't been there before. However, about 2 months ago, I started noticing concerning changes. The first thing I noticed was the change in her eating habits. "Sophia, you've hardly touched your salmon meuniere." "Sorry. I'm not very hungry." Dishes she used to love now went barely touched. She started skipping breakfast more often. Food I put in the refrigerator was increasingly being thrown away untouched. Her sleep patterns had also become irregular. Her room light would stay on until 2 or 3 in the morning. On holidays, she often slept until nearly noon. Walking past her room, I could see the bluish glow of her smartphone seeping through the door. "You've been staying up late a lot lately. Is something wrong?" "No, just homework and thinking about things." After that vague response, Sophia returned to her room. She spent more time staring at her smartphone, refusing to let it go until the screen went dark. Sometimes she would jump at the sound of incoming messages. Concerning reports started coming from school. Her math test scores were lower than usual, and she was falling behind in submitting English homework. My usually meticulous daughter was increasingly forgetting to do her homework. When her homeroom teacher called, I was hurriedly walking down the hospital corridor to take the call. "She's been spacing out during class more often. Is there anything concerning at home?" "I'm sorry. I think it's just typical teenage changes." As a pediatrician, that was my assessment. Too much interference could be counterproductive. Watch over her and provide support when needed. That was my professional judgment. However, the concerning changes continued. Unfamiliar stationery and books appeared on her desk, and sometimes her wallet seemed unusually empty. Her expenses seemed to be increasing, but I didn't know where or what she was buying. I myself was busier than ever. The number of emergency surgeries had increased, and I was now responsible for training new doctors. My return times were irregular, and I had less time to talk with Sophia properly. "Dr. Watson, there's a request from the emergency room." "I understand, I'll go right away." My smartphone in my white coat pocket had an unread message from Sophia. A short question asking, "Will you be late again today?" I headed to the emergency room without being able to reply. In those hectic days, I had dismissed my daughter's changes as just teenage fluctuations. As a pediatrician and as a mother, should have been more sensitive. But I didn't understand then. The light in Sophia's room that wouldn't go out at night, the suspicious messages being sent, the cash disappearing from her wallet. All of these were warning signs of what was about to happen. When I returned home after my night shift, dragging my tired body, Sophia was already in her uniform, about to put on her shoes. Her shoelaces were tied more carefully than usual, which somehow felt unnatural. "Welcome home, Mom." "Sorry, I'm leaving early today." "This early?" "I have morning art club activities." Her behavior seemed timed to match my unusually early return from the night shift. But there seemed to be a slight tremor in her voice. She wasn't carrying her usual sketchbook, and instead clutched an unfamiliar bag. "What about breakfast?" "I'll take some bread with me, don't worry." On the kitchen counter, there was a half-cut piece of bread. The jam jar hadn't been opened. Without any sign of preparing breakfast, Sophia hurriedly left the house. As I watched her leave, something felt off. The pleats in her uniform skirt were disheveled, and her blouse collar was messy. But with my exhausted mind after the all-night shift, I didn't have the energy to think about what it might mean. Just as I was about to go to bed after taking a shower, my phone by the pillow rang. The school's number was displayed on the screen. "Mrs. Watson, I apologize, but could you come to the school right away?" The school counselor's heavy voice resonated through the receiver. I could hear people talking in hushed voices in the background. "Did something happen to my daughter? I'd like to discuss the details with you in person." The way those words trailed off suggested something serious. My heart started racing. I hurriedly changed clothes and drove to school. The journey from home to school felt longer than the usual route from the hospital to home. The usually 5-minute drive felt like an eternity today. Every red light filled me with growing anxiety. When I arrived at the school, the vice principal was standing at the staff entrance. His usually calm face was strangely tense today. An unusual silence enveloped the school building, with a faint lingering scent of fire trucks in the air. Several teachers stood in the hallway, averting their eyes as soon as they saw me. There were no students in sight. They must have been gathered in the gymnasium for an all-school assembly or something similar. "This way, please." Walking down the hallway led by the vice principal. The sunlight streaming through the windows felt unnaturally bright. The place that should have been bustling with students' voices was now filled with a heavy atmosphere. When we reached the hallway in front of the principal's office, there was Sophia. She sat alone in a chair, shoulders slumped, head down. Her uniform was disheveled, her skirt wrinkled. The sketchbook she usually carried was nowhere to be seen. The unfamiliar bag I had noticed this morning was also gone. 2 police officers stood beside her. A male officer in his 50s had a calm demeanor that suggested experience, while a young female officer occasionally glanced at Sophia with concern. Their presence spoke to the seriousness of the situation. "Sophia." At my voice, my daughter flinched but couldn't raise her face. Her long hair hid her face, but I could see tears falling beyond it. "Mrs. Watson," the male officer stepped forward. His movement was careful. "We need to talk to you." He pointed to a security camera monitor in the hallway. The screen showed surveillance camera footage. A date and time blinked in the corner of the screen. The footage showed events from this morning. Sophia entering the second-floor girls' bathroom. Her steps were a bit quick, as if she was conscious of her surroundings. Then, she comes out in a hurried manner, as if being chased by something. She seemed to be clutching something small in her hand. Then, faint smoke began rising from the gap in the bathroom door. The screen mercilessly recorded the gradually thickening smoke. What is this? My knees nearly gave out, and I almost collapsed on the spot. The female officer quickly offered me a chair. We confirmed a fire had started. Fortunately, the sprinklers activated quickly, and it didn't escalate into something more serious, but... The officer's voice echoed distantly. But my eyes didn't leave my daughter's back. Her hunched shoulders trembling slightly. Her uniform looking smaller than usual. None of the lively expression she used to have while drawing at her desk remained. Sophia, why? Hot tears welled up in my eyes as I questioned. I had dealt with many children in pediatrics. Though I should have been able to understand their pain and sadness, I had completely failed to notice the darkness in my own child's heart. The vice principal's sigh echoed heavily in the hallway. The third stall in the second-floor girls' bathroom was the point of origin. I nodded silently to the police officer's explanation. 30 minutes had passed since the questioning began in the principal's office. Outside the window, white sprinkler water sparkled in the sunlight. Thanks to the early activation of the sprinklers, we fortunately avoided major fire damage. However, the officer placed an evidence bag on the desk. Inside was a burned mobile phone. A familiar red case. It was Sophia's phone. We attempted to question your daughter, but she continues to remain silent. Would you cooperate with the inspection of her belongings? I nodded again. Words wouldn't come out. Sophia beside me kept her head down. I could see her shoulders trembling slightly from time to time. The principal opened his mouth heavily. In light of this situation, the school will be temporarily closed from today. We have already begun sending notifications to all parents. Following these words, the vice principal added. We are also starting to receive inquiries from media outlets. We will handle this with student privacy protection as our top priority. Outside the window, the sound of news vehicles' engines could be heard starting up. When we left the building after the questioning, several cars were parked in the parking lot. I could see other parents too. Some quickly averted their eyes when they saw us, while others tried to secretly take photos with their phones. When I started the car's engine, my smartphone vibrated. It was a message from a colleague saying rumors were starting to spread on social media. Dr. Watson, perhaps you should consider taking some time off. A message from my hospital superior had also arrived. When we got home, Sophia disappeared into her room without saying a word. I collapsed onto the living room sofa. Why did this happen? What was in my daughter's heart? Was there something I should have noticed? Memories raced through my mind like a film reel. The days of repeated night shifts and on-call duties that reduced time with my daughter. Times when I was too tired from work to properly engage with her. The signs I dismissed as typical teenage changes. As a pediatrician, I should have been able to understand many children's hearts. But I had missed the cry from my daughter's heart, who should have been closest to me. The bread from this morning remained untouched in the kitchen. 2 rice bowls lined the cupboard, and Sophia's favorite yogurt was arranged in the refrigerator. Our usual daily life suddenly felt distant. Looking up the stairs, I could hear sounds from my daughter's room upstairs. I start to approach, but my feet stop. What should I say now? What should I ask? Dusk approached, and the house gradually darkened. I didn't even have the energy to turn on the lights. I just kept thinking in the darkness. What was my daughter trying to say? What should I have been able to do? How should we face this going forward? The doorbell rang, and I squinted at the incoming light. The female police officer had returned. We found new evidence. In her hands was another evidence bag. Inside was a burned piece of paper. The fragments of readable text suggested new developments in the investigation to come. The sound of rain outside intensified the waves of regret washing over me. The light from my daughter's room upstairs flickered on the rain-wet window. That night, I greeted the morning without sleeping. My smartphone was flooded with concerned messages from colleagues and acquaintances. There were many calls from unknown numbers too. They must be from the media. The hospital formally recommended I take a leave of absence. My superior's words, "Don't worry about your patients," filled me with both gratitude and apologetic feelings. My hands trembled as I stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast. I dropped and broke my favorite mug. As I collected the fragments, tears suddenly started flowing. The everyday morning scene now felt like a distant memory. The casual conversations with my daughter, every moment we spent together, now felt precious in hindsight. There was still no sound from upstairs. I stood in the kitchen, unsure whether to bring up breakfast. On the morning of the third day after the fire, the police contacted me. Outside, hints of autumn were beginning to appear. The maple leaves in the garden were starting to change color. "We've received new testimonies. Could you come to the school?" There was an unprecedented urgency in the voice on the phone. I quickly got ready and headed to the police station. My car carried my anxiety and impatience through the morning rush hour traffic. In a room at the police station, I learned shocking facts. Multiple female students had come forward. Their testimonies were surprisingly consistent. And they all pointed to one teacher, James Wilson, the science teacher. The first to speak up was a senior from the art club. Her brave action encouraged other students to come forward. Though fragmentary, the girls' testimonies revealed clear facts. Their hands trembled on the witness stand, and though they sometimes stumbled over their words, they continued to tell the truth. That evening, Sophia finally spoke at home. "Mom, I couldn't take it anymore." In a trembling voice, my daughter began to tell me about what had been happening for the past 6 months. The sexual abuse disguised as science tutoring. Evidence left on her mobile phone. Threatening messages from the teacher, and inappropriate photos and videos from him. In panic, Sophia had tried to burn her phone containing all the evidence using a lighter from her uniform pocket. That resulted in the bathroom fire. At first, it was just after-school tutoring. But gradually, Sophia's words were halting. I held her cold hands tightly. It wasn't just me, but I couldn't tell anyone. He said, he would ruin my future, my chances for recommended admission, my artistic talent, everything. Tear-filled eyes looked at me. Those eyes were filled with pain and fear she had been carrying alone. He would often call out to me after club activities, in the empty science room, saying he wanted to show me some materials. I was speechless at Sophia's confession. I couldn't help but blame myself for not noticing the abuse happening right in front of me, both as a doctor and as a mother. Night duty until late, training new doctors, increasing patients. All of it sounded like mere excuses. Why didn't I notice? Why couldn't I protect her? Waves of self-reproach washed over me. The investigation progressed rapidly. The despicable acts disguised as after-school tutoring. Girls forced into silence through threats and intimidation. The school's inadequate management system was also revealed one after another. Blind spots in security cameras. Lax management of after-school classroom use. The ineffective student counseling system. The problems were structural. Faculty meetings continued late into the night day after day. Angry shouts flew at parent meetings. Various speculations circulated on social media, and the media continued their stakeout at the school gates daily. The entire local community was wrapped in great shock and anxiety. Through all this, Sophia was slowly trying to reclaim her true self. "You know, I started drawing again," Sophia whispered one morning, as we shared breakfast together for the first time in a while. A month later, Mr. Wilson was arrested. The school announced a complete review of its management system. A support group for victims was also established. Among parents, a committee for preventing recurrence was formed. Efforts had begun to ensure such a tragedy would never repeat. Every Wednesday afternoon, we attend counseling together. About 3 weeks after starting counseling, Sophia opened her sketchbook for the first time in a while. Though her hands still trembled, she began drawing with sure strokes. "I found something I want to draw again." Those words brought tears to my eyes. Weekly counseling. My daughter's gradual steps forward. The presence of supportive friends. Everything was a step toward hope. In the counseling room's waiting area, we meet other victims' families. We who couldn't even face each other at first have now formed a small support group. "I'm really sorry about back then. But it's okay now. Because I have you, Mom." At those words, I held my daughter tightly. I felt this wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. I felt truly proud of my daughter's strength as she moved forward, despite being hurt and suffering. I decided to return to the hospital. And this time, I volunteered to specialize in mental care for abused children. I wanted my experience to help others carrying similar pain. "Let's set up a new specialized outpatient clinic." I nodded firmly at my superior's suggestion. A place where I could use my experience in a new way. It would surely become a place of healing for me too. Outside the window, autumn winds rustled through the trees. Golden ginkgo leaves danced as they fell in the schoolyard. Gentle sunlight illuminated a mother and daughter's new step forward. Next month, Sophia will resume her art club activities. Her new sketch will be displayed on the club room wall. It was a drawing of a single flower on pure white paper. A small but strongly blooming flower. I believe that her drawings would someday become a light that heals someone's heart. And I'm certain that this experience will deepen the bond between mother and daughter even more. In the season when Christmas decorations adorned the streets, Sophia's exhibition was being held in a small gallery. Among the displayed works were pieces born from that incident. A ray of light breaking through darkness. A wounded butterfly spreading its wings. And the back view of a mother and daughter holding hands. Many visitors were local people who knew about the incident. In a corner of the exhibition room, the Victim Support Group's activity report was also being presented. Sophia's courage had become a catalyst for others with similar experiences to speak up. The school had established new counseling services and opened a 24-hour hotline. Regular training for faculty and staff had also begun. At my hospital, a specialized outpatient clinic for abuse victims had started. As a mother and as a doctor, I hope to turn this experience into strength for the next generation. Mom, look, Sophia showed me her new sketchbook. It's for my spring exhibition. There was a young tree reaching toward the light. Though there were scars on its trunk, new buds were beginning to grow strongly. Beyond the freezing season, our new story was surely moving forward. Catherine Winston's steps felt heavier than usual as she climbed the worn stairs of St. Anne's Church in Annapolis, Maryland. Sunday morning service was her most cherished time of the week, but today, something felt different. Grandma, look! My new ballet shoes. Her granddaughter Olivia's voice cut through the gentle spring air as she bounded up the stairs. Catherine couldn't help but smile. The 5-year-old girl in her brand-new pink ballet shoes was as light as a sparrow. Oh, how lovely! But remember, no running in church. Yes, ma'am. Behind Olivia appeared Catherine's son David and his wife Rachel. The dark circles under David's eyes betrayed his usual fatigue. His middle management position at an IT company seemed to be slowly draining his vitality. Mom, could you pick up and drop off Olivia this afternoon? Of course, dear. Catherine answered without hesitation. Even at 63, she hadn't lost the decisiveness from her days as a vice president at an investment bank. Since losing her husband 10 years ago, her granddaughter had become her reason for living. Inside the church, Rachel's parents, Joseph and Margaret Brown, were already seated. Joseph's once proud bearing as a real estate tycoon was gone, his shoulders noticeably stooped. The bankruptcy with its $3 million debt had stripped him of everything. Rachel, about this weekend. Just as Margaret started to approach her daughter, the hymn began. Catherine observed the Browns from the corner of her eye. Margaret's outfit was still overly flashy. It was clear that their lavish lifestyle, unchanged even after bankruptcy, was leading to further financial ruin. After the service, Catherine watched her son and daughter-in-law among the people chatting with coffee in hand in the church garden facing Maryland Avenue. David's shoulders carried the heavy burden of his in-laws' debt. He had missed out on a promotion just last month. Grandma, will you come to my ballet recital? Olivia came running over. Of course, sweetheart. I'm looking forward to it. As Catherine hugged her granddaughter, she pondered the child's future. All her weekend charity work was for children in situations like this. The group headed to Whole Foods Market near the church for lunch ingredients, as was their custom. David's aging SUV glided into the spacious parking lot. As they got out of the car, Catherine caught a glimpse of anxiety on Rachel's face. David, has work settled down? Catherine called out to her son. Yes, managing somehow. His curt reply clearly masked deep exhaustion. Pushing the shopping cart, Catherine observed her family. Rachel, once a kindergarten teacher, still had a knack for planning meals that children loved. Lately, though, a dark shadow seemed to lurk behind her smile. Rachel, pot roast tonight? Yes, it's David's favorite. On the surface, they appeared to be a harmonious couple. But Catherine sensed something was off. The tension was particularly noticeable when Rachel spoke with her parents, more so than before. Hey, Grandma. Olivia tugged at Catherine's hand in the produce section. This broccoli looks like a bunny, doesn't it? Catherine's heart warmed at the innocent smile. Yet she couldn't help but sense the precarious adult circumstances swirling around this child. No one could have predicted that this Sunday shopping trip would be their last moment of peace. On Tuesday, the Annapolis Mall parking lot was bustling with shoppers drawn out by the spring weather. At 2 p.m., Catherine led Olivia by the hand through the supermarket's automatic doors. Grandma, can I get ice cream? Yes, but just one. Shopping before ballet lessons had become their secret pleasure. Catherine held her granddaughter's hand while checking the shopping list David had entrusted to her. We'll get the ice cream last, okay? Okay. As they were making good progress through the vegetable and bread sections, Catherine's phone rang. The display showed David. Just a moment, Olivia. The phone call lasted mere seconds, just a minor addition to the shopping list from her son. But those seconds changed everything. Olivia. When Catherine turned around, her granddaughter was gone. They hadn't even reached the ice cream aisle yet. Olivia. Fighting back panic, Catherine scanned her surroundings. Despite it being a weekday afternoon, the store was crowded. But there was no sign of the familiar pink dress. Excuse me, have you seen a little girl in a pink dress? Catherine asked a nearby store employee. I'm sorry, I haven't noticed anyone like that. Trying to control her panic, Catherine ran through the store. Ice cream aisle, candy aisle, restrooms. No sign of Olivia anywhere. Attention shoppers, we are looking for a 5-year-old girl in a pink dress. As the announcement echoed through the store, worst-case scenarios flashed through Catherine's mind. 15 minutes later, her trembling fingers pressed the phone buttons. David. Olivia is. The police arrived 10 minutes later. Uniformed officers quickly sprang into action, checking security camera footage and beginning interviews. But no decisive leads were found. Olivia had vanished completely in the crowd near the checkout counters. The security cameras showed no suspicious individuals. It was as if she had dissolved into thin air. Mom. David's voice echoed through the chaotic supermarket as he rushed in from work. Behind him stood Rachel, her face ashen. If I hadn't answered David's phone call. Catherine's voice trembled. Mother, please don't. Rachel's voice caught in her throat. But there was something odd about her tone. Looking back later, it might have been closer to guilt than fear. The police search quickly expanded that day. The city of Annapolis was consumed by news of Olivia Winston's disappearance. Local news stations ran special programs, reporting daily on the kidnapping of a wealthy family's daughter. David immediately took leave from work, spending every day coordinating with police and searching. Meanwhile, Rachel often sat silently at home. Most peculiar was the attitude of Rachel's parents. "We'll do whatever we can." Margaret's voice on the phone was unnaturally calm. The investigation had begun to stall. Multiple analyses of security footage yielded no new discoveries, and witness testimonies provided no decisive leads. Interviews with supermarket employees produced no significant clues. A week passed, then a month. Catherine attended St. Anne's Church daily. There, she continued to pray for her granddaughter's safety. Though she maintained the composure of her former role as an investment bank vice president, tears flowed freely during her prayers. 5 years later, a package arrived at Catherine's mansion on Maryland Avenue. A brown envelope with no return address. Inside was a single worn videotape. That day, Catherine had just returned from church as usual. When she picked up the package from her doorstep, her intuition told her something was coming. But she never imagined the shock that awaited. Could it be? Her hands trembled as she connected the VCR to the TV in her study. The screen glowed blue, and the video began. A space like an old warehouse. A large decorative yacht panel on the wall. And a girl in a white dress. Olivia, who should now be 10 years old, smiled at the camera. "Grandma, I'm safe." Catherine caught her breath. It was definitely Olivia's voice. But something was off. Unnatural, as if reading from a script. The yacht panel on the wall behind her, that decorative design seemed familiar somehow. The video ended after 30 seconds. What remained were countless questions and a faint glimmer of hope. That evening, Catherine visited a private investigator's office. "You want to reinvestigate a 5-year-old case?" "Yes, but this time with this as a lead." The detective's expression changed after watching the video. "This yacht panel. Annapolis Harbor." "Yes, I thought so too. Annapolis Harbor. The iconic location of the city, lined with numerous yacht clubs. And a key development area for Joseph Brown's real estate company before its bankruptcy." "What about security camera records?" "Most from 5 years ago have been deleted." However, the detective opened an old laptop. "There's an interesting testimony from the warehouse district at the harbor. Mike Donovan, a janitor. Since 5 years ago, he's noticed signs of activity in a supposedly unused warehouse." Catherine drew in a sharp breath. At the same time, her keen mind began working. What about the Browns' movements? They've maintained an unnaturally high standard of living after bankruptcy. Especially Mrs. Brown's shopping habits. "Let me know what I can investigate." Catherine's voice had regained its composure. Over the next few days, she mobilized all her connections. Former banking colleagues, real estate industry acquaintances, and police contacts from her charity work. All the information gradually but surely pointed in one direction. Suspicious money flows. The Browns' real estate transactions. And most concerning, Rachel's changes. Rachel, whom Catherine saw every Sunday at church, had visibly lost weight. Her former gentle smile was gone, replaced by an expression of constant fear. Even David seemed unaware of his wife's transformation. "I hear you've hired a private investigator." One day, Margaret called unexpectedly. Her voice carried a coldness unimaginable from her usually mild-mannered self. "Yes, we have new leads." Catherine maintained her composure. "You should give up. For your granddaughter's sake." The words could be taken as a threat. The next day, Catherine met with the detective again. He had made an important discovery. "Mrs. Winston, these are insurance claim documents." The papers the detective presented showed records of life insurance inquiries the Browns had secretly made immediately after Olivia's disappearance. The amount, $1 million. This insurance, actually 1 week before. The disappearance was when it was taken out. Catherine closed her eyes. All the pieces were starting to fit together. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. The warehouse janitor Donovan had left a crucial testimony. Every Wednesday at midnight, he had witnessed someone entering the warehouse with large shopping bags. That person was Rachel. Catherine's voice shook. Meanwhile, in the warehouse, a girl in a white dress was being forced to record another video message. In front of the yacht panel on the wall. At the warehouse district of Annapolis Harbor, in the early summer twilight, Catherine sat in her car listening to the detective's explanation. Beyond the old warehouse complex, an orange sunset was about to sink. Donovan's testimony is reliable. Every Wednesday at 11 p.m. Mrs. Rachel always goes to this warehouse. Why won't the police act? Insufficient evidence. But look at this. The detective handed over old architectural plans. This warehouse actually has a basement. In the 1980s, Joseph Brown's company did renovation work. Catherine's eyes narrowed. Yes, everything was connected. Brown Real Estate's hidden assets. The debt forced upon his daughter and son-in-law. And the $1 million insurance policy. Rachel is being coerced by her parents. Catherine's voice was tinged with sadness. Just then, her cell phone rang. It was from David. "Mom, Rachel. Rachel has turned herself in." In the interrogation room at Maryland State Police Headquarters, Rachel began to tell everything. What happened that day 5 years ago at the supermarket? I was being threatened by my parents. Rachel's trembling voice was recorded. It was a desperate plan by the debt-ridden Browns. $3 million in bankruptcy debt. A repayment plan using life insurance money. And an innocent life sacrificed for it. Father gave me no choice. He said if I didn't cooperate, he would put pressure on David's company. The supermarket incident had been meticulously planned. Even the phone call to Catherine was orchestrated. In the crowd, Rachel led Olivia out through the back door to her parents' waiting car. Olivia is in the basement. Rachel's confession triggered an emergency police response. The warehouse raid took place at midnight. SWAT team members at the front line rushed down the stairs to the basement. There, Margaret stood using Olivia as a shield. Joseph was behind her. But the situation took an unexpected turn. Grandma. I'm okay now. 10-year-old Olivia spoke with dignity. Grandma Margaret protected me. Facts revealed in later interrogations showed that Margaret had resisted her husband's deranged plan until the end. The basement was furnished with Olivia's study desk and bookshelves, with her drawings posted on the walls. "I am the worst mother," Rachel wept. "But I visited Olivia every week. Taught her studies." It was also a story of twisted love. A faint light of humanity remaining amid madness and sin. The sentences were handed down considering the circumstances. 20 years for Joseph. A suspended sentence for Margaret. And Rachel, with mitigating factors considered, avoided prison time on the condition of participating in a rehabilitation program. The following spring, in St. Anne's Church Garden, Olivia wore new ballet shoes. After the blank period, she had begun dancing again. Beautiful. Catherine smiled watching her granddaughter. Though sessions with trauma care specialists continued, Olivia's recovery exceeded doctors' expectations. However, it was by no means an easy journey. "Grandma, can we go see Mom?" Rachel, receiving counseling at the rehabilitation facility, was allowed monthly visits. "Of course." Catherine sighed deeply as she answered. It took time for David to accept his wife's betrayal. But he couldn't ignore his daughter's wishes. He too prayed every Sunday at church. "Dad, look." Olivia demonstrated a pirouette in the church garden. The scene was like that day 5 years ago. "Well done." Beside Catherine, David quietly wiped away tears. 5 lost years. That time can never be recovered. But this family had begun weaving new bonds. The church bells rang, announcing Sunday service. Olivia took Catherine's hand. "Grandma, let's go." The two began walking toward the church. The spring sunlight gently embraced their shadows. Sometimes, the brightest light is found in the deepest darkness. This family's story had only just begun.